Okay, so I hope you were able to figure it out, but I'm going to pull up this diagram that we went through earlier. So what's missing, so if you think of this as user for our blog app, and if you think of this as articles, what's missing is this user ID, which is the foreign key, right? Because right now our articles have no way of referencing the user. So we have the has many and we have the belongs to, but the belongs to, which is articles model, and the associated articles table has no way or no reference to the user. So this foreign key is missing. So we're going to have to add the foreign key, right? So how are we going to do that? Actually, before we do that, if you want to test it out and not take my word for it, hop into Rails console. And that association should have been enough to make something like this work. Let's say user equals user dot first. So it picks up Bob. And then something like this, user dot articles. This is giving an error. Okay? This would not be giving you an error. Because the user has no articles, it would have just returned an empty array. But right now it's saying the method's missing because the column is missing, right? So let's go ahead and clear this up. Actually, I'm going to exit the console. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create the foreign key column for the user ID in the articles table. Okay, so how do we do that? Go ahead and type in Rails generate migration, add user ID to. Now you can name this however way you like, but it's good to stick to some convention, right? So here we're trying to stick to a name that would actually make sense for what we're trying to get done in our migration. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of migration files and not know what each one does. So add user ID to articles, okay? So we see it created this file over here. So let's pull that up. All right. So notice how this one was smart enough not to create a table. If you remember when we had created the run the migration to create users, it had automatically given you a create table row. But here, in this one, it hasn't done that because it's smart enough to know that you're basically adding user ID to something. It's not saying create user, right? Or create something. All right, so here we're going to add column, and then first you want to give it the name of the table that you're adding the column to. So articles, right? The next thing you want to give it is the name of the foreign key. So here we want the foreign key to be user ID. It's automatically going to associate this with, it's going to look for the users table, and the unique primary key, which is the user ID. That's what this is going to look for, right? When you add this column. So, but that is, of course, because we created the association at the model level or the model layer. And the last thing you want to give it is what type it is, so integer. Now, foreign key, primary key, these are always integers, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and save this. Now let's do rake db migrate. All right, it looks like it got created. Now, if we look at let's look at our schema. Notice how in the articles table, this additional column got added now, user ID. And that, because we created the association in the article model belongs to user, it's going to refer to, where's our schema? It's going to, this user ID is going to refer to the ID in the users table. So each row in the users table, the foreign key, that's what this is going to refer to. So if a user creates an article, that user's primary key is going to be stored here. Okay? All right, great. So now we actually have enough to make this association work. So let's go ahead and hop into Rails console. Okay, and then to make some room here. All right, so let's first test out our connection, right? So user.all. So we see our 3 users. Now let's do the same thing to article. So we only have 1 article, right? So let's create a couple of articles. Article create. Now we need a title. Again, the primary key, so article ID, will be assigned automatically by Rails, so we don't have to worry about that. We're just going to give it a title, test article, and then text. And the text, we're going to say this is a test article. Okay. Now, I'm not going to give it a user ID right now. Okay, I'm gonna assign it later. So there's a article. Now if I go article.all, whoops, I think I had a error there. Article.all. Okay, so now we have the 2 articles. All right, so how are we going to assign this user ID, right? There's several ways to do it, but here's one method. I'm going to create a variable, article, and I'm going to call it article.first. So I'm going to assign the first article to this variable, article. Okay, so if I do article, it pulls up the first article, right? Now I want to assign the user ID for this article. So if I do something like article.user ID equals 1, let's see what that does. Now if I go article, you see the user ID has 1. Okay. Now if I type in article.all, you see the, however, here you see the article ID 1. This is the first article. The user ID still says nil. What happened here? This article.first, and then when we went ahead and assigned the user ID as 1, we didn't save it. Okay, so this doesn't hit the database right away. It doesn't hit persistent storage. This is in memory of the object right now. All right, to save that, we're going to do article.save. Okay, now it's assigned it. The transaction's committed. So to test that out, if I type in article.all now, then you'll see the first one, the first article has user ID 1. So it got updated. Okay, great. Now, how are we going to reference this? Okay, we're going to go in real detail on this later on. But for now, something like, let's say, user, let's get the first user, right? So variable user equals user dot first. So that's Bob. So if I see who user is, we see that it's Bob, okay? Now, we know that the first article has user ID 1, and we know Bob has user ID 1. So if I go user.articles, check it out. It's actually showing the article associated with the user, right? So you can do something like article, which is that first article. And if you do article.user, it will return who the user was, who the article belongs to, right? So it's returning Bob. So if you go something like article.user.username, says Bob. Now, another way you can add let's say I want to add an article to the user, to Bob, okay? So we know user is Bob, right? Now, let's say article equals article.new, and then title we'll call hello Rails, and then text we'll call test article. Okay, so we did that. Now, this did not hit the database either, so I'm going to save this article first. Actually, I don't think I need to save it. I don't want to save it yet. And then I have my user as Bob. So if I go user.articles, and then this is the shovel, and take this article object that I just created, okay? So I created a new article over here with the title Hello Rails and text of test article, assigned it to this variable article. Now I'm basically taking that variable and I'm shoveling it into users articles. Okay, let's see what that does. So it committed the transaction. So now what should happen is Bob, who was our user, should have this test article, right? So if I now go user.articles, now I can see this test article is part of Bob's articles. Okay, great. So I think that's about as much as I wanted to cover on associations and setting them up. It's a lot of information, and it will take some time to basically sink in. All right. Now, I want you to play around with the associations here. I want you to create your own user in the test blog for sure. And then I want you to play around with these things. Go to this site, api.rubyonrails.org, or, Google active record associations and methods, and then figure out what some of these methods do that come automatically, right? And then play around with it. And then I want you to think about how we would design the models of chef and recipes and how we would set up the one-to-many associations. So I've kind of gone over them already in our diagram, but think about it, like what would be available just by setting up that association, right? Now, if you have not gone through the associations page on guides.rubyonrails.org, then now it's time to go through it. Pay special attention to the has many and belongs to at this time, which is what we'll use to build our association. So yeah, as a takeaway, pay special attention to the one-to-many association, which is the has many and belongs to. And I'll see you in the next lesson.